Welcome back to season 5 of Time to Change. I'm Chasen Forehand.
And I'm Dom Jones. We have some amazing conversations lined up from people doing the work. I'm excited for those and the change that it'll hopefully spark.
I can't wait to jump in. So let's get started. Today, Alysa Southall in the house, CEO and founder of A People Partner LLC. That QR code over Dom's left shoulder. Show them, Vanna. Oh, look at that. That QR code is to Alysa's ebook. You need to check it out. You need to check out her website and what she's doing. Fantastic work. Can't believe it. Thanks for being here today with us. And we are talking about all the generations. There are 5 generations in the workforce right now. So as a leader, how do you tap into that diversity and how does that generational diversity impact culture?
You know, that's a big question, Chasen. And I think the easiest way to start it off is the generations are not as different as we presume they are. We all want similar things, but it's how we define those words that are different. So I'll give you an example. The word flexibility doesn't mean the same thing to a boomer as it does to a millennial. And so I like to look at it as flexibility sits at the top of the mountain, and then there are all these sides to the mountain. And that's how each generation defines it. So maybe for those millennials, they want to work from anywhere. They want work from anywhere policies. They want to have some flexibility around their start and end times and when they're here and when they're not here, right? But then when we look at flexibility from a boomer, they want to start at 6 and leave at 2 because they have things to get home for, right? And so they have different ideas of what flexibility means to them. And so it's really understanding how those people in those generations define the terms that we're using in the workplace.
Yeah. I really like how you presented that. I don't think I thought about it from that vantage point of same thing, but it's defined differently. Mm-hmm. And here's what came to mind. Some of the work I've done in the past is around employee engagement surveys. Yeah. And I immediately thought of this example where some of the feedback that was received, there were some themes around communication, flexibility, ironically, and financial stability, essentially. And the immediate instinct was to try to put something in place to fix that. But what would have been put in place to fix it, according to what you just said, may have completely missed the mark, considering how many generations are present and how they all view it differently.
Yeah. And that's where taking those surveys and not saying, okay, based on the data that we see, here's what we think we should do. It's saying, here's the data we see. Now let's go to our people and try to understand what this means to them. How do we make change that's important to each of these groups of people and that's also sustainable for us? You know, you talked about communication. When you think about the generations, when I teach it, I try to come from a place of understanding what shaped us to understand how we communicate, how we respond, what's important to us. And so I try to take the sort of blame game out of it in terms of like, you know, the baby boomers hate the millennials and right, we have all this hate going on. But I'm like, okay, well, how did we get here? And so we look at these major things that happened, the Great Recession, the Great Depression, the birth of the internet, the birth of social media, right? The longevity economy, these things that happened to these generations that happened to all of them up and down because those fears were instilled in us and vice versa. But those things shaped our communication styles. Those things shaped who we are as people and what we desire from the workplace. And so we have to understand how those things shaped us so that we can better understand how to communicate and serve our people in a good way. But what it all comes down to is, are you talking to them, those people in your organization, and making sure that you understand what they want? Because just because they're in a generation doesn't mean that they want the same things of that generation.
She's bringing the fire. She's just like, take the shoe off, throw it at the screen. Let's go. Like, goodness gracious.
We're trying to keep up with you, Alysa. I don't even think we've asked a question yet. This is how good this is.
He asked one.
Okay,
I
fair.
asked one. Like I popped the cap, I popped the top, and it's just like, let's go. Yeah,
I
but
love it.
I love it, and I love how you explain it. And you know what?
Yeah.
And it's like dead on. When you were saying boomer, I always chuckle when being a boomer. I always chuckle when people tell me about who I am. But that was pretty dead on. Like I have stuff to do. Like I
Yeah.
would love it if I could get to that place. I am not quite there yet. That's what happens when you start a nonprofit. You just like so my day starts at 5 or 6 and then it ends at like 10 or 11, except for Friday nights. Jody, when you watch this, know that I said this on camera.
He said it.
Friday night is date night. It's sacred. And when this show is over, I'm done.
Love it.
So,
But
Well
see,
done.
that's flexibility. And that's understanding you might not feel the same way for all the days. But as an employer, I have to understand that those Fridays are non-negotiable for you.
yeah.
Yeah. You know, with a lot of the differences that come innately with the different generations, what strikes me is that there is still something that we can all get from each other. There's a way for us to all grow from this unique moment in time where we're brushing up against so many differences. What that leads me to is if we could spend a minute talking about the importance of mentorship in the workplace. And I find it fascinating. There's more of this trend emerging where typically where you think of mentorship, it's kind of top down or more experience to less experience. But you're starting to see this reverse mentorship happening. I would love for you to speak, Alysa, if you can, around benefits of partnering with different generations and how mentorship comes into play.
And I love your example because that's exactly where I was going to go. So one of the desires of the boomers are they want to mentor people, right? That's one of the things. If you want to engage them, you need to be giving them mentorship responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
However, right, to your point, and I like to use the boomers and the millennials because I think those two generations have some disdain for each other that is not necessary because they're very similar. It's true. They're very similar in a number of ways. And I think because of that, they sort of butt heads a little bit. But I'll use them as an example. So there's so much that a millennial can learn from a boomer about the historical knowledge of working in that company or about some different things that they might have acquired either through the course of that company or their time over their career. But what the boomers also are noticing is that there are some things that they can learn from those millennials, right? How to maybe create better work-life balances, how to put up boundaries where it's acceptable, how to use technology in a different way than they imagined before. And so my recommendation to every employer is find a way to take those generations and get them in a room together and let's see where our strengths groups and be able to say, okay, now let's work together to solve whatever this project is with all of your brains in mind, right? So getting all of them in the room because they're all going to think differently about that same task.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, like, I like to take, when we talk about diversity, I like to take diversity into diversity of age, diversity of experience, diversity of culture, right? Like upbringing, all of those things are part of diversity and generations are a big part of that.
You know what we're talking about now, I think hammers home how critical it is to have a new type of leader, frankly, that's needed to be successful in this landscape.
Yeah.
Previously, you could be a leader if you just knew the space really well, or you were a really great performer. Now, if you're lacking cultural competence and emotional intelligence, it's very difficult to be successful in this landscape. I'm curious, Alysa, we'll have you just riff for a second about the importance of or the importance of the new type of leader to lead in a landscape with so many generations present.
Yeah, and everybody's gonna throw a little bit of shade at me here, but so this is where I believe, and I've told this to Dom and others, I think millennials are going to change the world for the better. And boomers, you can hate me. Go ahead, throw all the shade, the tomatoes that you want. But The millennials have much more empathy, I think, than any other generation that's existed. Obviously, Gen Z is going that way too. But I think we were brought up in a very different space where, because of our mental health issues, a lot of us are in therapy. So we're working on ourselves and we have a lot more emotional intelligence. And so because of that, we have this new definition of leadership. And if you don't, and it's not just us, right? Now the boomers are saying, we want that style of leadership. The Gen Xers are saying, we want that style of leadership. And so as we start doing that, I say, right, the train has moved forward. COVID really expedited the ability to work from home and move some of these emotional intelligence pieces forward in these new leadership styles. Yeah. And so I always like to use a train. I said, the train is moving forward on the track. If you do not want to go forward with us, you can stand and watch us go by, but we do not go backwards on this train. So that's really where it comes down to. And I think that's why I feel millennials are ready to lead, because we have all of these naturally born and curated skills around that emotional intelligence cultural piece that you're talking about. But here's where I think, anybody, if they want to learn those things, right, tap into all the resources that are out there. This is where your mentorship comes into place. If you want to be a leader and learn that cultural piece and that emotional intelligence, go to those people in your organization who you see demonstrate that and say, I'd like to learn this from you. I'd like to understand how you see the world this way, right? And it's not going to be a one-day transition. This is going to be you both investing time together. And so I think that that's where we can have some of that mentorship. And again, like bringing all those people to the same table and saying, we want to go here, but we need your help to get there. And we see your strengths in these areas, right? I think we often put everybody at separate tables. And I'd like to just say, let's all just sit at one table and figure out how we can work together to go where we want to go.
Brilliantly said. And a word that kind of crept from under the surface of what you were just explaining, humility, comes to mind, because it takes humility to even allow another generation to say, I'm great and here's why, and not take it as an indictment, no matter who's saying it, but then to also recognize the greatness of what others have to offer and allow that to take center stage when necessary.
Yeah. And to your point, being a really good leader takes a lot of humility, and you have to be very vulnerable, and you have to recognize that your way isn't always the right way, and that other people in your organization that you've hired are there to do the things because they're good at them, and you've got to get out of the way and let them do those things.
There's always this space, as a former track runner, I know this was like do or die. There's this space, the handoff zone, where one person was responsible for handing it to the next. But they had to be so coordinated, so in sync.
You can't miss that transition.
You can't miss it, because then the whole team fails.
Yeah.
And that's the metaphor that comes to mind with the different generations all being in the workplace.
Everybody in a running order, in a relay, has a role because of their strength, and they're put in that position because of their strength. And so if we look at generations in that way as well, we put them where their strengths are, but then that baton is where it also becomes super important. And so I like that example, and I think that could really work as a teaching mechanism.
Yeah. I love that. Chasen, bring us home, or else we'll be here all day.
Oh, Lord. Well, first off, scan that QR code and pick up Alysa's wonderful ebook. And we have been talking about generations in the workplace, why it's important to tap into these resources, to listen, to be empathetic, to have emotional intelligence. This has been a wonderful conversation with Alysa Southall. This is Time to Change. And I am Chasen Forehand,
who's about to leave and go on his date because it's Friday night with his wife.
This is true.
And I'm Dom Jones,
who's about to go to his kids.
That's right.
Right in the corner, like, hey, Dad,
yes, they are.
You done yet? We've been on Time to Change. Thank you so much. We'll catch you next time.